Welcome to the Practical Frequency Guide. The Practical Frequency Guide has been put together, crafted with 12 essential steps that I have discovered within myself over the years of studying that keep coming up as a consistent. They're time-tested, there's an ongoing relevance, and they include the foundations, basics, and also some of the underlying premises that build and allow your consistency within the area of play with frequency and vibration. And they're also quite specific in their attention to either the small aspects, so that you can begin to understand the larger. And in some cases, they're broader and more global in order for you to understand the small and minute specifics. Each of the 12 steps have been broken up into 12 learning parts. You could think of that as 12 weeks, or you could think of that as 12 processes. Each that has a base where there is information and theory, and also practical application. Underlying all of this is the essential ingredient for you to practice within the vibrational frequency of all that makes you up. Beginning to interact with vibration, energy, and frequency in a more conclusive way, in a more inclusive way, so that your influence and the vibrations of your being are aligned to your highest and good. And also, you can go in when things are getting a little bit tough, you can go in and make some alterations and changes. Now, here's some reasons why you might like to commit and dedicate yourself to this level of practice. If you're the type of person who really likes to actually achieve in life, to get things done, and you've learned from multiple failures over the years, and you're also actually intolerant to that level of cyclic failure, then the Practical Frequency Guide digs deep into the realms of your whole inner being and also the body being, and allows you to work with small parts that will make a significant difference in the future, so that you can get that sense, that level of satisfaction and achievement right, and move away from that failure sense, which of course is only feedback, but you know what I'm talking about, don't you? Perhaps you're the type of person who really loves to make a difference in the world. You're here for service. You love to connect with people, and you want to be able to make a consistent difference. I can tell you right now that learning these kind of skills and these kind of tools, the levels of vibrational frequency that we'll be playing within, across all the scopes of it, it'll make the work that you do even more powerful. It'll take it to another level. It'll take it to another step. Longevity in the practice. If you're applying it because you're finding yourself in disharmony with people, or even disharmony with yourself, and you'd like to move out of that into more alignment, again, this is a good reason to listen up over the next 12 essential steps, or 12 weeks, where you can begin to delve deeply into all of the moving parts, or many of the moving parts that make you up. If that sense of control, having some control in the sense of your life, is really important to you, you really don't like feeling out of control, I understand this. Let's begin to develop deep levels of inner trust, so that you can experience that alignment internally more and more often, And even if you already are very good at this kind of work, I know for myself, going back to the foundational basics, having reminders about the little tweaks, the refinements, make a difference every single time I bring myself into that level of practice. So if that sounds like something you would like to experience, you would like to experience the difference in this, you're willing to commit, to dedicate yourself to this kind of investigation, this kind of exploration, this kind of purposeful practice, then you are certainly in the right place. Because this is what we are going to be exploring in the 12 essential steps of the Practical Frequency Guide. Imagine, if you will, heading into a travel agency, sitting down, and a travel consultant says to you, "So where do you want to go?" You go, oh, I don't know. Or going out for dinner, sitting down in a beautiful restaurant, just the kind of sensations you like in a restaurant, just the perfect lighting, the music that you love, with company that you truly enjoy. And there you sit, a glass of wine or a drink that you enjoy arrives on the table, and you're having a conversation with the other person. And you're waiting. And you're waiting. And you're still enjoying the conversation with the person, but you sort of start looking around. And you're waiting. And you're waiting. You kind of get a bit niggly inside, but you're not sure really why. You kind of notice that other people are being served. Other people have these steaming, delicious smelling foods walking all the way past you. Other people are biting into their food and putting into their mouth, and in a way your own juices in your mouth are going off. And yet you're waiting. There you are, waiting. Imagine if you headed off on a journey. Cars all packed. A road trip. Tons of clothes, of course, more than you probably need. You're in the driver's seat. And you have to make a decision. Are you turning left? Are you turning right? Are you going straight forward? And you wait. And you wait. And you wait. And eventually you can hear horns, beep, 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 behind you. Beep, beep. And you're waiting. Not really sure what you're going to do. Three very simple scenarios that are easily solved with knowing what you want. It's not unlike life, really. When you know what you want, and you know it very deeply, it's easy to be committed, to take the purposeful actions, and to make your way toward, and eventually having that which you want. Sounds simple, doesn't it? And at many levels, you know this, you get this, you understand this. However, when we break this process down, you'll also understand why sometimes we have those waiting moments, or that level of agitation or concern in the process that we call life. You see, as an incredible human being, day by day, week by week, year by year, even decade by decade, you have ongoing opportunities that are presented before you in the process of you living your highest potential. And sometimes we feel we fall short from this. And yet if we look at it from a broader perspective, effectively we're walking down in the forest one step at a time. Would it be useful for you to investigate some of the aspects that may help to clarify a deep inner knowing of knowing what you want? And in some ways, some navigational tools that can break apart all the contributions towards knowing and living what you want. You may have realized, you may have participated in this level of experience in your own life, where sometimes you're kind of sifting through everything that you don't want. You know, I don't want this, and I don't want that, and I don't want this, and I don't want that, and I don't want this. You'll hear it in your language. Yet when you know clearly what it is that you want, you've got that clarity in place, you can actually speak it. Your voice can use the power of vibration effectively to bring it more into manifestation when you have the clarity. Now, by the way, when you're talking about the things you don't want in life, it's still activating levels of vibration that are densifying in form to bring it into reality. Or, by contrast to that, if you're simply speaking of that which you see external to you in the external world, and you're just confirming what it is that you're seeing and feeling and experiencing, there's some level of recreating the same recreation within this space. And it's very important here to realize that you are the constant inside of this contrast and clarity. And actually the two exist in the one space. But we're going to separate them out for a moment and take a look at them each individually. Does that feel like it'll be useful? Let's take a look at the contrast first. So we're going to sift through the contrast a bit. And first of all, we're going to start off at quite generalized levels, just beginning to point towards some of the aspects of play that we're going to be diving into over the next 12 essential steps, or the next 11 essential steps. But let's get a broader image, sort of kind of like a bit of a road map, so that we can begin to organize ourselves and our awareness on this journey. So we're going to go into the contrast first. So if we open up just the contrast, so these are the things that are opposite to the clarity of what you want, or actually help you define the clarity of that which you desire to experience in life moving forward. Now, as we go into sifting through the contrast, sifting into those details, there's multiple levels here. So there's your current observation. Now, remember, you have an internal world, you have an external world, you have a whole encompassing body being, and then there's more of you than that too. Then, of course, you have the feed-in from other people as well, plus your past life experiences, the habits of thinking, the habitual ways of being, the habitual doing patterns, multiple memories that will be encoded into your DNA system. We'll be getting to that later in this guide. You have body memories, so emotional memories. And then you have this consistency of action or inaction. You also have vibrational frequencies that are underlying with the whole of all of this together. You can see how amazing you are. And we haven't even labeled everything here. What's interesting is that in a now space, wherever you are right now in life, there's multiple ways that you can see but they're your current observations, the way that you're perceiving the world at the moment. So if you just perceive you as separate from your external reality, and you have a look around in your external reality, you can see perhaps some walls, furniture, art, animals, beings in that area. Now, that is one level of current observation. You can, from this particular space that you're in right now, you can observe your current life conditions or your current life situations. Yeah. And in doing that, as you look around your current life, there will be contexts or areas of life that will come for you to have a look at. So remember, these are concepts of the areas of your life, but effectively, there'll be probably one about family, probably one about relationships, probably one about work and career, probably one about money, probably one about social, and then a myriad of other things that may come into that. These are the life areas and effectively life situations that can be observed by you. Now, you'll have certain filtering systems that you're seeing those current life situations and life areas through. And this is perfect. Here's another layer of current observations. And this is more of a singular one to you, although it's multidimensional. It's also singular. So this is the you that is observing you without the external feed in. So it's more sensory deprived. So it's more of an eyes closed internal view of how you do you. There's multiple things that you can observe in this observation. There's self-observation, where you're aware of in your body physical, what you're aware of in your emotional body, what you're aware of in the mind body being. And of course, those are all intertwined within the one. Much to observe inside of there. And now, there are more current observations that you could pay attention to. But for now, that's a really good start on how we are sifting through the current contrast of our perception of life. You see, this naturally leads to levels of awareness. So as I was directing you to have a look around into the room external to you, having a look around into your different life areas, having a look internal to your own self, we were going through layers of awareness and levels of awareness. This is something that is going to, in our work together over these next 12 essential steps, begin to grow even more. And I know for myself, no matter how well developed your levels of awareness and conscious awareness are, there's always other layers. And if you're just starting on this journey, the next unveiling or revealing of another level of awareness, conscious awareness, will bring in new information. So this is a part of sifting through the contrast. Let's investigate levels of attachment for a moment. Oh my goodness. So in this conversation, there's an invite to look at attachment not as a good or bad thing, but simply as a way of being deeply connected to some concept, something, some being, some way of being, some belief, some emotion, right? So it's simply levels of entanglement or connection. So I'm just calling it attachment as a useful way of looking at it, because then we can turn that around a wee bit. So levels of attachment to certain things in your life. So we're just going to have a look for now. So you will have, as you observe within the space of your life, you will have certain levels of attachment to some things more than you do others. Your own name compared to somebody else's name. Your children or family compared to the image of a child or a family external to you. The type of work you do, or where you spend your money, time, and attention. Those things that you've invested in more. The levels of attachment will be much deeper than those things that you've never paid attention to. So I'm going to invite you for a moment to think of something kind of random that you don't give any two hoots about. You don't mind anything about it. You have no pull, no push, no rejection, no nothing. And there'll be something that's come across your path in a recent while where it just sort of went over your head, or you didn't have anything, no response internally. That is completely different than something you've invested your time, effort, and money in. Something that you feel very attached to, invested in. These levels of attachment are something that we're also going to be playing with. They're also some of the filters that we move through when we're sifting through the contrast of what we do want and what we don't want. Because here's a little secret. Some of these attachments that we have so tightly wrapped around the things that we don't want in life. That creates a stickiness. We'll have another look at that moving down the track. And if you're ready to move on, let's have a look at levels of fear. Now, fear is just a word, F-E-A-R, just a word. However, when we feel it deeply, when we know it as an experience, it doesn't just feel like a word, does it? It feels almost more real than sometimes the external world. Now, fear is an important part of survival when it comes to the physical living your life or not living your life. It's not that what we're talking about here. The fear that I'm referring to is that fear that seems to creep up within or come at you from an angle or come in from behind around things that you perceive as important in your life or that you don't want in your life. And fear is a massive driver. Fear is a massive inhibitor in the human psyche. In most cases, it is fear that prevents anybody from doing anything that is out of the comfort that they know. And it is fascinating. Even though the fear seems so real and alive in any one moment that we're focusing on it, just as real as it appears, is as illusionary as it is. Now, this is great at head concept level. And this is where most of us as a human psyche leave it. I've just got to get through my fears. Just got to break through my fears. Oh, I know it's just a fear, but I really feel very, very scared about it. And even though I laughed then, you'll know deep inside of yourself that sometimes you've let fear arise within you that has been larger than life. It has a history that you can back up. Reasons, multiple reasons of why you do or don't do something. The only reason I'm bringing up fear in here as levels, the levels of fear and the contrast, is sometimes they're almost like an electric fence. I'm going to use it as an electric fence idea. This sort of an electric fence is set up in a paddock to keep the stock from moving out of that particular section of paddock. Sometimes fears within us, within the psyche and the body being, that we've allowed to still be there, or that we received as a learning and they've served us well at some point, we have outlived. And yet we're still navigating around these electric fences. We won't even go and touch them because we've had some level of touch the electric fence and bounced off it. So I don't know if you've ever seen an animal touch an electric fence and get a shock, or if you can even just imagine in your head what it's like when you actually reach out and touch an electric fence. There's a shock that just runs, it's like a jolt that just runs through your body, and it's not comfortable. You know? And the body memory, I mean, I'm not fast to touch an electric fence at all. In fact, I'm very aware when I'm on a farm because I grew up on a farm, and so I know these electric fences, and I've had shocks, purposeful shocks, I've had accidental shocks, and I have no desire to experience that electric fence shock again. So it's the same thing with these fears. Yeah? It's the same thing with these illusionary fears. There is a capacity to turn off the switch, just like you can an electric fence, and then it no longer has the same level of charge, which equals that there's no longer an electric current running through the fence, which equals there is no longer the capacity to get a shock or a jolt. Now the electric fence has just become a nulled experience. And by the way, animals know when that electric fence has been turned off. They will just plow right through it. So we go to these intrinsic natures within us. When the fear is not turned on, when there's no charge running through a fear, you innately know that deep inside of yourself. And so in these levels of sifting through contrast, when there's no charge in an old fear, you'll sift a bit deeper and a bit cleaner. You'll search a bit more. Yeah. Okay. So levels of fear, we're going to be talking about that a lot more coming up too, but when we're sifting through the contrast of that which we don't want in order to come to a conclusive, clarified decision on what it is that we do want in life, it's interesting to know that these are some of the levels that we're going through. And then last but not least is the perception of empowerment. And this definitely is a perception. It's kind of blends a little bit with the current level of awareness. Perception is a way of seeing the world, a filter, a lens, an operating system. When we're sifting through the contrast, sifting through the details of that which we don't want in our life, we will discover levels and layers of when we feel empowered and when we don't feel empowered. When we don't feel empowered, there's a sense of loss of control, loss of power, loss, lack. Radiates back to fear again. Laying blame and certainly justifying. And in most cases, it's because the power at some level has been given away, or we sense that at some level we have given our power away, or we may see it through some perceptions that someone took our power away. Now, you intrinsically know when you feel in the flow of empowerment. You know what that feels like. You feel like you can access all of the resources that you need. You feel like you can access all of the systems. It's not necessarily like that, you've just had 2 glasses of wine and you're bulletproof. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about that sense inside when you just know that you've got it. You got this. You got this. By contrast, you also know what it feels like when you don't got this. It feels like everything is hard. Like decision making is out of your control. The ball's sitting in everybody else's court. You're being puppeteered. Feeling like you're being pushed around or tossed by the wave of life. Or many other experiences like that. And so these are the perceptions of feeling empowered or feeling disempowered. And it is fascinating that as we're sifting through the contrast, in order to come to the clarity of what it is that we do want, we're also sifting through the perception of feeling empowered. I like to use the word reconnected to self, that inner sense of self. And so what I'm going to invite you to do now is to just take a moment. Just allow the thoughts that come up into your mind, into your awareness, that arise within you to be written down. Just jotting down some notes. You're not writing a book here. You're simply just jotting down a few things that have come into your awareness as we were going through sifting of the contrast. Remembering that we were doing this at a high level. However, already the inner look into you will be happening. Allowing that to occur now. Just for the next minute, I'm going to invite you, with a pen and paper, to jot down some of your thoughts, observations, and awarenesses. And just coming to the end. Just coming to the end of that. And in coming to the end of that, there's a realization that the way to form clarity is through the beauty of your observations, your levels of awareness, your levels of attachment, the levels of fear or not, and your levels of empowerment through your body being, through the whole of all that is you. Forming clarity occurs through broader observations that open up new ways of being. You see, most problems are not solved within the same level of the problem. The solution always comes from a different space or a different place. The problem no longer exists. And so also when we move from one way of being, those things that we don't want to have happen in our lives, or those things that we've had a learning out of and now desire to experience something else, we form this into a clarity from a much broader observation. The capacity to see more sides, more parts, and therefore solution orientate and reorganize ourselves into a different way of being. More on that coming up. There's also a depth and a breadth of awareness. There's less dissecting into small parts as we form into a clarity. Yes, of course, clarity, and here's the beautiful duality of this. Clarity seems to form from a one light perspective, from this tiny dot of bright clarity light that seems to just shine, just like a light bulb, seems to just shine into the area, and there's just no more darkness there, right? It's amazing how small the light needs to be in order for its brightness to shine out. And this is the same thing with your point of clarity, which seems to have a depth and a breadth of awareness. So a much larger way of seeing things. There's often new levels of healthy detachment that come in here. It's the best word I could come up with at this moment. Now, there's some levels of attachment to it, so your essence is involved in it, and you're a part of this thing. But there's also some levels of loosely, instead of holding on and gripping on. It's this gentle care, the same sort of way you'd hold a baby chicken or perhaps a butterfly in your hand. It's a healthy detachment. It's a non-grabbing thing. It has a sense of open hand wonder. When you're in clarity, it feels like this. It's just so deeply known by you that it just is true. And there's a lightness in the hold. Also, in this forming into clarity, what begins to happen, and you'll know this within your life already, there's a deep inner connection with yourself. And the building of the practical frequency guide and the multiple moving parts inside of this will come into one thing, and it is your inner connection, which seems to be the solution for almost everything that exists. This deep inner connection. And I tarry within that space to point towards and allow a truth to arise within you. That are even now, that are newer, fresher, more clarity. The depth of sense of feeling can begin to arise in your inner connection and develop and evolve and mature as the practice over the next 12 essential steps continues to unfold. And then, of course, the forming of clarity begins to have an outward flow because it has happened at that pinpoint clarity point within, that deep inner connection, that tiny white light that lightens and brightens everything to allow an easier outward flow. So when it comes to the sifting of the contrast and moving into clarity, I'm just going to invite you to take just 30 seconds. 30 seconds of clock time, all the time you need outside of clock time. To close your eyes, to bring your attention into your physical heart organ, into an inner white light of clarity. To allow the evolution of this process of connecting to begin to unfold for the highest and best for you. in your workbook or PDF, you'll discover that there is a navigational tool that has been offered with this first step, essential step. And this navigational tool is simply a guide for you to work through the contrast, to work out what it is that you don't want in your life, so that you can come to clarity with what it is that you do want in your life. It's a really good place to start. So I'm going to go through this navigational tool more as a conversation with bullet points. But you'll find the navigational tool in your workbook or in a PDF. All right, so for now, we are simply going to go through as a conversation the navigational tool. Some people find it really easy to state exactly what it is that they want in life. It's just simple for them. It's just the way it is. And then other times, those same people, as they're moving through and sifting through the contrast to come to their new truth or their new clarity or their new knowing what they want, there is a process that they're moving through. Now, this in life is quite large. It can be over a couple of months. It can be over a couple of days. It can be over a day. It can be over an hour. It can be over a minute. So it's happening naturally. And what we're doing here is bringing it into more conscious awareness so that you can actually know what it is that you're sorting through in order to be able to know what you want and to be able to clarify that, state it in the positive, experienced as a felt sense in the body, which moves to the vibrational perspectives as well that we will be talking about and discussing. And then how you'll know when it's real, which is kind of a very powerful thing because it's like your conscious convincer. When people are convinced, when they've got a conscious awareness convincer, when they've got something inside of themselves that is convinced of something, it just becomes a truth and therefore a new reality. And it will begin to show up in the external world. Now that's what we're moving to, right? And you have a navigational tool to be able to work with. However, let's go back to what happens when there are people in this world who don't know what they want or find it hard to define it, or over those year, months, weeks, days, hour, or 3 minutes, tend to feel it quite deeply inside of themselves as they're moving through this contrast. So we're just going to open up the scope of that a wee bit more. Yes, it will be refined into great detail at some levels, but at least you'll have this navigation. You'll have this kind of internal GPS of, oh, I get it now. This is that. This is that. This is that pathway, or this is that pathway. And so that you can clarify where you are in the process as well. So you're going to be sifting through this stuff. Now, stuff is a really, I've heard it before. I think it was in The Secret. Joe Dispenza mentioned stuff, the word stuff, and how, I think it was Joe Dispenza, I could be corrected on that, mentioned how stuff is such a technical word. But it is, we're sorting through this stuff. And in this regard, I'm talking about stuff being all the details, all of the, everything that was brought up before that shows up in the contrast, which is the levels of awareness, the levels of fear, the levels of empowerment, all these things, perspectives and perceptions that we have in life. And we're sorting and navigating through this. All right, so that's where we're starting. We're sorting to work out all of through this stuff. Then there's this meeting of the contrast. Oh, this is what I don't want. And it'll be often felt as a felt sense in the body. Oh yeah, I don't want that. And there's a real clarity. In fact, there's a conscious convincer. There's a real convinced nature within this. Oh yeah, definitely don't want that. Which, if it goes unchecked or unnoticed by you, it's actually a message. It's so clear, so clarified that it sends out to the universe, this, at a vibrational level. And so sometimes many of us think that we're just so sucky at creating, but we're not. We're really highly attuned at creating. It's just we're kind of still staying in the contrast when we're setting up these clarifications. And we're going, I don't want this in my life. And what shows up? that thing that you said you didn't want. So sometimes we need to meet the contrast, to meet that experience, to go into that and to find in the sifting process of what is the opposite to that, so that we can have that much clarity around the positive or the contrast to it, so the opposite to it, the clarity that we discover in the meeting of the contrast. When we do this without fear, it certainly directs us to where we do want to go and the clarity that we'd like to come into. Often we have to find clarity in the what we don't want before we can move forward. So this is a fascinating thing. When it's done just in one part, clarifying what you don't want, and when it's left like that, we tend to create this in our life. When we meet the contrast and we clarify, oh yeah, that's what I don't want in my life. It begins, and then we stay there. We can begin to find that within the meeting of the contrast, a new awareness arises. Clarification that points directly to what it is that we do want. A real key in this process. Then there's refining the details. Again, many times I've asked people, so what is it that you want? And they first of all go to the, well, I don't want this, and 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 I don't want this, which indicates that that sifting through the contrast, the things that we don't want, that we've experienced, that we no longer want to have in our lives, we've got great detail in. And by contrast, in the clarity, we don't have the same level of detail. So isn't it beautiful that the contrast offers exactly that, a bounce point? When you have layers and layers of detail in what you don't want in your life, in a way to build a really well-formed outcome, a really crystal clear focus of what it is that you do want to have in your life, all those layers of detail will point to what it is that you do want. And it's okay to meet those layers of detail in the meeting of the contrast and refine those layers of detail to begin to build an image that is something that you can begin to internally create in your internal worlds, so that it is resident within you in that fine detail of clarity of what you do want, having seen both sides of the same thing. And I'm hoping that you're beginning to see why sifting through the contrast is such a powerful thing to do. And when we can do this playfully, it opens up worlds of playfulness in the creation process and the practical frequency guide to your life. And of course, every time you go in here, there's more to learn. I'm always learning about how powerful the sifting through the contrast is, and its direct nature to holding the secret wisdom of the clarity that you really desire to have in your life. As we also sift through the layers of contrast, we will discover that there are motivations and convictions. Motivations is a topic that's been used in the corporate sense, and we all sort of talk about, I'm motivated, I'm not motivated. You know when you're motivated to do something, and you know when you're not motivated to do something. It just is. You could just kind of, you should do it, but you don't. And so what happens here is, in the creating of the motivations, you're finding out what moves you to action. And I'm finding out what moves you into action, which of course action is one of the essential keys in this practical frequency guide. Then it'll be aligned, free-flowing, easy, effortless action when every part of you is on board. And fascinatingly so, you will find your motivations inside of the contrast, you'll find that which you are convicted of, convictions, things that are just the way they are. I do point out here that sometimes it's really useful to change some of the premises or the underlying reasons we do things at this point here. Because if we're moving away from fear as our motivation, it's non-inclusive. And although it will pivot us and cause us to take action in some kind because of the fear of the contrast, the fear of loss or the fear of lack, it is one motivation and it works without a doubt. If you want to use fear as a motivation, it will work for you. I know it does. And if you are becoming quite highly tuned and aware in the shifting and changing of beliefs and that kind of thing, and underlying premises in life and some of the operational programs, and fear is you are more fearless in life, then fear no longer becomes the motivator. And this is why searching through the contrast within this space becomes very powerful. Because what is equal to the fear that once used to drive you? And this will be a deep, deep mantra question. What is equal and more powerful? And yes, of course, it points to love. An action with love, or love that inspires action, reaches deep levels into the human psyche. It bypasses so many problems. In fact, problems don't exist when love is the inspiration that inspires action. But if it's only as a headspace, then it's not as a conviction, a knowing, a deep internal wisdom that just is, which you may begin to notice more and more through this program. You may still want to use fear as a motivator, and that is perfectly fine because it does work. So just be aware in this space of where you are in your conscious awareness, in your inner play, the things that you navigate around in life. And every time you do this process, because by the way, this is a day by day, month by month, even moment by moment process. It happens very, very fast. Remember, we are unwrapping it so that you can have a really good look at it. So creating the motivations, the inspirations that are equal to that which was driving the fear provides that point of clarity to be so convincing that it becomes a conviction of it just is. And then soon we'll be exploring the gap. But we'll do that soon. In the meantime, what you have here is the capacity to, let me see if I can do this properly. To, as I was saying before, there's a little bit of fun with the technology end of this, in order to help you to be able to move forward into the next part, right? And the next part is creating and designing that which you want to have in your life. And in the creation and the design, it's building the full imagery, full sensate feeling, tapping into and touching into the vibrational frequencies of this, the inner knowing, all of the aspects of you, so that your body being knows it as its truth. And there are many parts to this. And the navigational tool that you have starts to build an image through your writing and through your interaction with it, to build what's called a well-formed outcome. where you can begin to fill in all of the jigsaw pieces of what it will feel like when that is in your life. And ultimately, that's the key. What would it feel like if it was already present, if it was already here? And you had that same level of conviction in the desiring of it, but now in that it is already here, even before it shows up in your external world. Because the creation process first happens inside of you. That's where it happens. And then begins to show up in the external world. Then, and only then, it happens inside of you first. Sometimes just so easily because you're ripe and ready. Other times there is a longer space of time, and because of this time-space reality. And yet, when you just know that you know that you know that you know, around anything, the universe will reorganize itself to agree with you in an external form to that which you already know. So in this navigational tool, there is this create and design aspect, right? What do you want? Clarify it. Re-clarify it. Clarify it. State it in the positive as though it's already here. Kind of like goal setting. Kind of like goal setting. So as it's already here. And there's some examples in the PDF. It's already here. It already is in existence. And then you're reaching into the felt sense knowledge of that. What does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? What are the senses that you have in the space when it's in existence? Sometimes this can be easier to talk about it or to write it. Everybody works differently in this level of function. It's not necessarily every single thing that you see, but that here's some experiences that are quite normal, pulling from the neuro-linguistic programming perspective. The seeing or the visuals will normally be light. They will normally be quite large. They will normally be brightness and colour and movement. That's how they will normally be when you have a true positive movement towards that which you like. The sounds will normally be melodic. There'll be things that you enjoy. There'll be sounds that make you feel that you already have that thing. Could be an internal voice. Could be something that you would naturally just say to somebody, or somebody may say to you. The feelings that you feel will be comfortable. They'll be the right temperature for you. They'll be the right texture for you. They'll have the right movement for you that feels good. They'll have the right amount of weight. They'll have a certain place perhaps in your body. And then there'll be other senses too. There might be a smell connected to it or a taste. And this is not for the logical mind to go, oh, that's because. It's just there'll be a certain taste or smell in your inner sense and your inner intuition factors too, that is a knowing of this clarity when it already is. And then, by the way, multiple other senses will kick in that confirm this sense of feeling. And as you're experiencing it, not external to yourself, but as you're experiencing this evolution of this creation of what it is that you do want, you'll start to have messages running through the body system, the body being, that are interacting with each other. It's kind of like all 50 trillion cells. I'm going to get to this, but all 50 trillion cells begin to go, oh, is that what we're paying attention to? And the communication systems in all of your body beings start to communicate this. Oh, this is the new norm. This is what we're experiencing. This is how it is. And so this is why visualization has taken such a leap into mainstream is because the brain body being actually can't detect the difference between what is real on the inside as what is real on the outside. Not really. Yeah. So we're engaging this magical creation factor of you, what's called visualization, which is not just visual images. It's visual imaging that also combines the orchestra of how you're made up. And you're tweaking and tuning this. And this is a part of the play. And this begins to evolve the more time you spend in this way of being, begins to mature. And then the final conviction is, how will you know when it's real? How will you know when it's real? One I always remember for me is I wanted to go on a trip over to Sedona. And I looked and I was like, oh yes, I want to go on that tour. That would just be exactly what, I didn't really know what I was going to get there or what the experience was like, but I just deeply knew that that's where I wanted to be. And so I started forming my capacity within me to experience the sense of what it would feel like to be traveling on a spiritual quest to Sedona in America. And I thought, well, how would I know it to be real? And I thought, is it when I buy the ticket? No. Is it when I'm packing for the trip? No. Is it when I'm on the airplane? No. And as I built the trip in my mind, I was like, oh, I'm going to go and visit a friend who lives in Baltimore in Maryland, which is quite a long way from where I was going in Arizona. However, when I began to go, oh, I'd really like to see her too, that's when I knew that it would be real for me. When I saw her face, when I saw her sparkly eyes, when we were on the same ground, when I had landed in Baltimore in Maryland and I could see her, that's when I knew that this trip would be true for me. And so that was my conscious convincer. That really drove me even more. It's like, yes, I want to see her. And I want to do the spiritual quest as well and have that experience. So everybody's going to have a different thing and a different part in the journey when they know it is real. And by the way, your inner knowing of when it's real happens before it becomes real. As if this is something that you can play with as you move through your creation process. Now, there are other parts that play a role, and they will be brought up more and more through these 12 essential steps. But let me just come at them from a nice broad overview so that you can have some of these words in your language, so you can have some of these awarenesses, and perhaps they're already in your language and in your awareness, but I'm just going to start pointing to them. So designing the state of being, and this is a large part of what we're going to be playing with in the practical guide, the practical frequency guide, is where is your center? Where is your attention to the environment? Because there's two environments. There's the environment of your body being, and there's also the external environment. There's the environment of your cells as well. We're going to be playing with us moving forward. Then there's that deep inner knowing when it goes past just believing something. And the deep inner knowing is intimate to every single human being, their own deep inner knowing. It's a certain sense that each individual being has for them, uniquely made up by them as a recognition tool of when you're on track. And then there's that feeling of support, and we're going to be building this into the program too, is this feeling of support of that you're supported by the universe, that you're supported and you can trust yourself, you can trust the process, you can trust the flow. Yeah, so we're going to build levels and layers of support as we move through. And by the way, it won't just be about this thing that you're working on, it will cover all areas of life. There is something intrinsically in the nature of the human being that desires for a feeling of support. Many people, and I know I have myself, misconstrued this to having something that's just normal. Yeah. And sometimes normal feels supported because it just is, and we don't question it. It's just the way it is. And yet we struggle when we're not feeling supported. And yet there is a way of being inside of yourself so that you can know that you are always so supported. So intrinsically in the nature of supported being, ultimately underneath that is a sense of knowing that you are loved, that you are worthy, that you are here. We're going to be navigating through these during our process together. And then, of course, there's that sense of flow. You'll know this sense of flow naturally when things just are flowing and they just happen so effortlessly. It's kind of like, oh my God, that happens so easily. That sense of flow is you kind of look back and go, wow, how did everything show up so easily? It's a sense of you're going with the flow of the river. You're going with the movement of the wind. You're going with, in my mind on the moment, on a motorbike. Instead of fighting the corners, you're leaning into the corners. You're actually at one with the process. That's something I really love to do, is not to ride a motorbike by myself, but just be on the back of a motorbike, because there's that sense of freedom that happens, and that, especially when someone else is driving, for me, because I have to just trust and go with a sense of flow and support of these tight turns, these deep dips, and just moving through. And it's always for me, during those shifts and changes, that I notice how easily I am or how resistant I am to the process of life. And it's the same so with our process of life, right? Are we easily just turning effortlessly with the changes, or are we fighting the corners as we go? Okie dokie. This raises a very interesting thing. The creation process. Always, there will be a moment where the gap shows up. The gap is where we sense that I wanted this in my life. So thinking from the internal perspective, I want this in my life, but it's not here. It's not in my external world. It's just not here yet. I expected it to be here by now. That kind of thing. This always opens up the gap. And it's this bridge that you can see here right now is just perfect, because the gap is just a space. It's just this void. And transversing the gap, or filling in the gap, or having the gap fill in itself, is a process too. It's deep levels of trust. But I can tell you, just like if you're on a high building and you have fear of heights, if you look down, there's going to be sense of flutters of fear through you. But every single time, even though you know that, you might look down and then it's this flutter. It's the same thing with the gap, right? The gap's going to be there at some point, and some depth, and some width, and some breadth. And if you keep looking at the gap, or if you keep looking down and reintegrating that fear, resetting it off, if you keep focusing on that gap, the gap just seems to broaden and deepen and widen. And so it's always easier to see in the contrast, right? The gap is also beautiful, because it is the perfect 3D perspective in our time-space reality to allow things to come into order in a useful way. When we don't perceive the gap as a problem, when we see it as the perfection of time in this space-time reality and the manifestation process, you probably know for yourself, sometimes when you wanted something, you thought that you really, 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 really wanted it now, and it didn't come till a bit later in life, or a little later on. And when you look back into hindsight, you actually know and realize that if it had arrived all the way back then when you wanted it, that it wouldn't have been the perfect timing. So there's multiple things to do with the gap. It's not saying that the gap needs to be there. It just is there. And when there's no fear around the gap, when there's a deep internal understanding that you can fill that gap with your love, fill that gap with your knowing, fill that gap, here's vibration, right? Here's presence. Fill that gap with the presence of knowing that it's all going to work out better than you can imagine because you're in trust in the process. The gap's no longer insurpassable. It's no longer an impassable bridge. What it becomes is the deep inner trust that you can walk across that without the requirement of the bridge. Because you're transversing levels of conscious awareness and a deep inner trust. I believe some people call this testing. They're being tested around something. For me, it's not that. It's just building deep levels and layers and maturity of this new way of being, this reorganization of self into the type of person that you will resonate at, you will vibrate at, the frequencies that emit from you, the behaviors that you have, the actions that you take, the thoughts that you think, and the feelings that you feel are all in alignment with that which you desire to have in life. And so essentially the gap is a beautiful part of your creation process, because first you created internally that which you desire, that which you want in life. And then you share it with all of the senses of you. And then as you walk around in life, you begin to, in essence, through trust and knowing, provide the platform and therefore the support for the actions that you'll take that will bring, by default, that which you desire the most into your life. So instead of being fearful of the gap, is it possible for you to be encouraged by the fact that this is the building of support? This is the new level of awareness and the trusting of you and the very inner nature, the powerful creation force that exists within you, and everything in the universe through the signals that you send out will conspire to support you for the highest and best, to that sense of knowing and better. And then, of course, as you work through the navigational tool, there will be a reorganization into action that will take place. Now, you work through the navigational tool for this, but this is just giving you a heads up of the overview on where you're headed. I was already referring to the vibrational frequency of you, the emissions, the magnetic signals, the electric signals, the vibrational frequency signals that you may not be able to see necessarily, but you can certainly feel, and others can feel it. And that which is like how you are emitting this frequency or this signal will be attracted to you. And so it's beautiful to have a visual here of this frequency. Yeah, the frequency wave, the emission of you. And then you take that into action. You will discover without a doubt, that in the wake, so a boat has a wake, so the boat cuts through the water, and then there's a wake behind it. It sends out we got patterns of water behind the boat. Yeah, so in your wake will be that which you desire in life, because you are always heading and moving, because you're a creator at a deep level and a learner at a deep level. This is deep within the human psyche, to learn, to grow, to expand, taking actions, gaining new clarities, filling in the gaps of the internal aspects of you, inspiring and igniting new ways of being. And this reorganization to action you'll discover is less from a fear action, the motivation of fear, and more because it's just a natural next step. It's just the natural next step. When you feel like that, then you know that the alignment within you is an integrated, clarified, clear, true alignment. It's just simply the next action. Remember, we're a work in progress. We are always evolving. And that's kind of exciting. It's kind of inspiring, really. Because the you who you are today, if he or she looks back, can realize that if you had trusted the process of life during the process of your life more, it would have been a little bit more fun, a little bit more playfulness, a little bit more joy along the way. Wouldn't that be a lovely thing to bring forward into the now? That you begin to trust the process deeply in the unfolding of life, the very process of you expressing in the world. And so, in this very first essential step of knowing what you want in the practical frequency guide, I hope that this inspires you to take the time to explore the navigational tool that is available to you. And then many people will have different ways of turning that navigational tool into something that inspires them. Some people like to turn that sort of thing into a vision board or into something visual. Other people create a little mantra, a little conversation that they have. Other people will start to bring it into their language more and more. Some people connect it to a song. Some people just have that sense of feeling and they just reintegrate it. And this is a lot about the frequency factor here, reintegrating and replaying and revisiting and reorganizing the inner feeling to be in alignment with that which you desire the most. Bringing it to life within, breathing the breath of life into that which you desire. And then it is highly recommended that a part of your practice, your daily practice, include building the muscles of this interaction with self. The interaction with your body being, the interaction with the cells in your body, the interaction with that inner centered space. The interaction of what it feels like and what you truly desire is already present in your life. And those are some of the practices that are truly available to you in these next 12 weeks, building the metaphoric muscles of creating the life that you desire in a practical way, in a frequency way, in a guided way, so that you can practically guide your frequency from a conscious perspective and an unconscious perspective moving forward. So have fun working in your navigational tool. Place that into, send that to wherever you're asked to send it to or not. Remember, this is a self-paced program. You can do it as you please. And the next part of the program will be available to you shortly. Thank you.